and welcome to Talk Art. I'm Sally Rain, and I'll be your host as we delve into the world of the artist and the art that's all around us. Talk Art is sponsored by the Silicon Valley Open Studios. During the first 3 weekends in May, hundreds of local artists open their studios to the public. For more information, go to the website svos.org. Our guest, Colleen Arakaki, is a printmaker who uses a variety of techniques to create her very expressive images that she draws from her life experiences. She is here to demonstrate some of her etching techniques. So welcome, Colleen.
Thank you, Sally.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. So you have a large variety of tools here. I'm really looking forward to finding out about etching. So tell us a little bit about your background in art.
Well, I have actually 3 degrees in art.
Wow.
Starting back in 1977, then walking away from art and coming back to it. And I came back and got my BFA at San Jose State and applied for the master's program, got in it, and stayed for the rest.
Well, excellent. What drew you to printmaking and etching?
Well, that's really kind of funny because when I went back to San Jose State, I couldn't get in any classes except for printmaking.
Oh, wow.
But I fell in love with etching in particular because you work with metal, you're moving metal around, you're putting an image on this hard piece of metal. And then you come out with this absolutely gorgeous print at the end of it.
Well, excellent. So tell us a little bit about what is an etching? How does it work?
An etching is made on a plate through the process of putting a resist on the plate, scratching through it, and putting the plate in acid. It removes all the copper from the plate, and when you pull it out and rinse it off, clean it up, you end up with these little lines that you push ink into. And when you put it on a press and put paper over it, run it through your press, you end up with these marvelous little lines on your paper.
So etching is a printmaking process?
Correct.
Okay. So, and you create the plates that then create the final version of the print?
Of the image, yes.
Well, excellent. So you brought some tools to show us how you do this process. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you get started and how you make the actual plate?
Okay, the first thing you're going to do, Sally, is start with a blank piece of copper. And you're going to take and use a scraper to shape the edges of your plate, smooth it off. And you're going to polish the plate up, and then
so just on the edges there?
Just on the edges. You want to scrape them, make them nice and round and smooth. You're going to take the scraper, then you're going to go in and burnish the edges of the plate to make them.
So what does burnish mean? What
Burnishing means that you're taking metal and pushing it back into holes, back into any kind of irregularities, and making it really smooth.
Oh, okay.
You use the burnisher also when you're working on a print to remove mistakes.
Okay. To
take a line you put in there or a scratch you put in there and get rid of it.
Okay.
And so those are I've got 2 kinds of burnishers here. One is really small, which makes it really easy on a finished print because you're going to, you take it and just kind of circle it around on your plate to remove the scratches and mistakes. Then this is another kind of burnisher. It's your burnisher and scraper combined. Some people use these, but I prefer the big handles.
Okay.
And then this is called a burin. And what you do with this is you use it to scrape through your grounds in order to remove them so that the acid can take the copper out of your plate.
Okay,
after
so
you put
what is the ground?
the ground is it comes in hard ground and soft ground. You can get it in a liquid form or this hard cube type. And what you do is you melt it onto the surface of your plate and roll it with a roller to smooth it out and make it really nice and even so you can see it.
So to melt it, it feels
Yeah,
like
see,
wax.
yeah,
What is it?
It's asphaltum,
Asphaltum. Okay.
which is a
It's kind of
and
like
it's
a
a very wax.
tar?
Yeah, it's like tar, and
Wow.
it is cleaned off with mineral spirits. It dissolves in mineral spirits,
Okay.
but it does not dissolve in the acid. It
Okay.
protects the plate.
So the part that is covered with the ground doesn't get etched.
Correct.
Okay. So how do you use the tools then with the ground? And
Okay.
underneath this is the copper plate, right?
Yeah, this is the copper plate. You always have a backing on it, and I have rolled some asphaltum on, or the hard ground onto it. And what I do is I take the burin to start out with and scratch through it.
Okay, so let's see that process.
Okay, so, I guess, actually, why don't we do a little landscape?
Okay.
I just went to the Grand Canyon.
Oh, beautiful.
So there's a
All
whole
right.
lot of wonderful, beautiful things to see there. So I'm just making marks.
So is this your sketch and then you'll scrape more, or is that?
Well, this is the part, and they're really, really thin lines.
And that's what will show up in the print.
Yeah, this is one line. It's a very, very thin line.
Yeah,
I
you
don't
can
know
hardly
if you
see
can
it.
see it.
Yeah, I see.
A little bit. Okay, one end of the burin is really sharp. The other one, I kind of flattened it out so that I will get a little bit wider line and a little more, I can twist it. As I twist it, I will come through and end up with a wider mark and a more expressive mark.
So when you're working on these, what inspires you? How do you know what you're going to create?
That's kind of odd because I don't know what I'm going to make.
Oh.
And that's the part of expressive imagery, or I work from intuition. And go up to my blank plate, my piece of paper, my canvas, and I just have to take a deep breath and trust that something good will come out of it.
Great.
Some artists need to have an image, a portrait or a landscape they're looking at.
Right.
Because they work in a more illustrative type way.
Right.
And I'm working with more from let it happen. I guess it's a 70s hippie.
Well, abstract.
Yeah, abstract.
Okay.
But anyway, as I work on it, something starts to work. And the world disappears while I'm working.
Wow. Yeah.
And there's a dialogue that I have with the piece of art. And then it starts to become, and then I start going into it. And
Right.
we're saying, okay, we need more, don't need more. Oh no, that's not going to work.
Great.
And so that's what I'm doing. Okay, there are some other tools that we can use. I often use, this is an engraving tool. It's kind of square tip,
Yeah.
cut at an angle.
So
And
is that for bigger lines?
that
or
will
bigger
create a very bigger line, and it'll also keep me from making pretty lines. I really don't want to do pretty.
Okay.
I was pretty when I was young and had pink curtains and stuff like that,
Right.
pink dresses and all that. And so I'm trying to stay away from that. And that's one of the things this will do. This makes a more aggressive, tough mark.
Okay.
So, okay. What am I going to do? And I can't always control what I'm, you know, the mark that's coming out of this. So it's more like giving up control.
Okay.
Some
Yeah.
people can do that, and for some people it's kind of hard.
Right.
But you know, for me,
know.
that's what's easy for me.
Okay.
And you can see, I'll show you the marks here.
So that's definitely very strong lines as opposed to, I can see a little bit of landscape coming through there.
It's starting to come out. And some of this I may have to burnish out and remove it after I etch it.
Can you put more ground back on it? If
I
you
can do that, and then it won't be as aggressive a mark. But every time you put one of these sharp points on a copper plate, it curls that metal up on the side. You know, scratches.
So you're actually scratching
You're
down
actually
into
making that metal curl up over the edge of the plate. And but you'd have to look really close with a magnifier to see that. And so, and this is another kind of engraving tool.
Great.
Which will make a different kind of mark. And, you know, I don't know whether you can see it, but this has a real wide line here, and a very narrow line there, and a very wide line there. So that's the interesting thing about using a variety of tools.
Right. And then what's this tool?
This is called a roulette. And what you do with it is you use it directly on a copper plate, and you roll it back and forth, and it puts little divots in the plate.
Okay.
Little hole, and you keep doing it over and over in all different ways, and you can create a dark velvety tone on your plate with that.
With the ink that goes into the holes?
Because you're putting a whole lot of little holes in there.
Great. Well, you have some images of the process that you do after you've finished the scraping of the ground. Let's take a look at those now, and you can discuss putting the ink on and the rest of the process.
Okay. This is what I was telling you about putting the ground, hard ground, onto the plate. I have a hot plate that I warm the plate and melt some of the ground on, use a roller to make it really smooth. That's how I created the plate you've just seen. And it's actually the same plate.
Okay.
So if we go to the next one, this is you would take that plate and put it into acid, and you know, draw on the plate, put it in the acid, and when you clean it out, you have you're ready to print. And this is the ink that you would print with. It's a very thick,
yeah, it looks
viscous,
almost like paint.
Oil paint, yeah. And it is an oil-based ink. And so what I'm doing is I'm scraping it on, and then if we go to the next one, I have used tarlatan to wipe off the ink. It's a very coarse, stiff fabric, and you wipe it off and then clean it with newsprint. Okay, and here I'm taking these plates and putting a little bit of color on by rolling a thin coating of yellow paint or yellow ink onto it.
Okay, so this is after the dark ink.
Yeah, after I've rubbed the dark ink into it and cleaned the plates, you know, so that the whites would be polished. But by putting that over it, the whites will be yellow. Okay, now here I'm putting the plates onto a template that's on my press. And it tells me exactly where to put my paper, where to put my plates. And then I'm going to put paper over it. And here's my press.
That's a big press.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, and you just roll it through, and it pushes the onto the blankets. The roller pushes on the blankets that push the paper into the plates. And when it comes out, it sucks the ink out into the paper. And so if you go to the next one, you can see the paper being lifted off of the plates, and you see the print coming out. And that's the finished print. And then these are plates that I actually have added to another set of, these are just the beginning of a bigger print. This is called Traveling to the Petroglyphs, Road Trip to the Petroglyphs, because the images look a lot like petroglyphs. And I call them image poems because each one of those little marks is a separate plate, an individual plate that has a little message on it, or something that will lead you. You read it like you would read a poem, like you would read, you know, a story. And so
this is the actual print that you,
yes, this is
you
the
created.
Print. Yes.
So tell us a little bit about what they mean.
Okay, I think of them as petroglyphs.
Right.
You know, when people make petroglyphs, when they carve into stone, they're leaving messages.
Right.
And many years later, people are looking at these messages and they really don't know what they are.
Right.
But they know that somebody was trying to leave a message. You know, it's like this one. I think of this one as falling stars and something cosmology. And this would possibly be a trail that somebody wanted to leave. This one would be, it has some images that are perhaps look like people or some individual or an animal or something, which are things that are often found in petroglyphs.
So very interesting. So, and I like the idea of the poetry because they do look, the small print plates that you make, they do look sort of like words, but they're not. They're images. So but they have meaning. Excellent. Very nice. Great. So tell us a little bit about the plates that you have.
Okay, these are the plates that we made the images with. And this is the proof that I originally made with the print. And you can see, Sally, you can feel the lines, and because that have been etched in. You can also feel, if you feel this print, you can feel the raised line where the ink is.
Yeah, no, I can, definitely. So the paper actually is impressed by the plate. It's not just the ink onto the paper.
Yeah, it's pushed into the pores of or in between the fibers in the paper.
Right.
And so that makes it very permanent.
So this is now very rough, so this has been used. Can you reuse these plates?
Well, I can sand them down, scrape all this off. I can burnish out some of the lines.
So
it's a lot of work.
A lot of work to reuse
and so I'm kind of lazy, so a lot of times I just cut them down and make smaller images out of them.
Well, there you go.
And just like these are some more of the small ones that
very tiny, tiny.
You can see in that were in the.
So that was part of the word.
Yeah, that was one of the words. There are little images in it. So
excellent. So you have some other images that you brought that are completed pieces. Let's take a look at those, and you can talk a little bit about the stories behind those.
Okay. Excuse me. Okay, this is how I got onto the idea of petroglyphs. I had some plates, and I cut them down and made these real narrow, long. Oh, these are probably 2.5 feet long and about 3 inches tall.
Oh, wow.
And it was a set of 5 plates, 4 of which are hanging on my wall at home. They're really good. I did those in my BFA, or not, my MFA. And they look like petroglyphs, and they look like stone. They have the quality of landscape and stone with some marks in them that look like messages being left. And so that was the beginning of all the long, narrow, and which led to also the tiny, little, narrow words plates.
So how do you get the grayscale?
You get grayscale by using a process called aquatint, and to do an aqua tint, you take your plate and sprinkle powdered rosin on it. Melt the rosin to the plate, and then you take it, cool the plate, put a little bit of ground on it again, like the hard ground or a liquid hard ground, to protect the parts that you want white still. You want to keep it white. And put it in the acid. It will eat away between the little pieces of powdered rosin that have melted to the plate. And you'll have texture in there that will hold ink when you're done. So you pull it out and repeat this process over and over of putting your ground on and removing it, putting the ground on, putting it in acid, and then doing it again and again until you get the number of grayscale in the grayscale. If you want 5 dark, layers of dark.
So the deeper the etching, the darker the ink will be on the paper? Oh, so that's what you're working with when you put it into the acid bath, is to make that variation in depth?
Yeah, that's why you do the repeated acid baths.
Excellent. So let's take a look at some more of your images.
Okay, this is an image that I call separating. It talks about my son and my husband and myself. We were really close, and now he's a teenager, and so he's separating from us, and he's supposed to do that.
Right.
It isn't always easy, but they're supposed to do that. And the smaller plates talk about going on his trip through life. It's going to be his trip, not mine.
Right.
But his trip. He's going to have to go his own way and learn what he wants.
The long images at the top are the people.
Yeah, symbolic of the people.
That's really nice.
And the others look like things that you would find on a road trip. Whether it's rain or whether it's birds or.
That's beautiful.
Landscapes. This is one of last year's little craziness I was working on. This is an etching, a fractal etching. It's made with 4 plates. At the time I started this series when I was watching a documentary on math in nature, and they started talking about fractals and how the more you keep doing them, the more you repeat them, they start to create their own image. They start showing different geometric shapes.
Right. Yes.
Well, this time I did 4 completely different plates, and they each have a different color. And you can start to see the patterns that are starting to build up. The more you put on them, they become a thicket. They become something out of nature.
That's beautiful. So in this process, each plate is the same size, and you did them over, not like the other ones where the plates are next to each other. This one, it's the same piece of paper 4 times.
Correct. You put your plate down on your template, and leave the paper pinched between the roller and the platen
so it doesn't
and the table. And that way it won't move. And then you remove one plate, put the next one in, make sure it all lines up, and run it through, and leave the paper pinched, and do the same thing over with the 3rd plate, and the same with the 4th plate. So takes a while.
Yeah, and you have some color pieces in the studio. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the color process and what you like about the color? Because the black and white, the grayscale is just gorgeous.
Well, color is a lot more difficult than one would imagine, and trying to learn how to use it.
Right.
In printmaking, I find I have to use a little bit less color unless I'm doing a monotype. And monotypes are, they're a single plate, or 1 or 2 plates. You can do a couple plates, but you paint on the plate, you only make 1 image. It's not repeatable, as with etching.
Right.
Etchings are repeatable. That's why people do etching.
Right. So the painting behind me is a monotype.
Correct.
Okay. So you then paint on the plate that you're
Yes,
creating?
this was done with 2 plexiglass plates. You know, again, they've had the edges beveled. And you start using a brayer, and you roll the ink on very, very, very thin. Otherwise, it will become a smoosh.
Yeah, no,
A
I can
drip,
imagine that. Yeah.
look like a drip. And I started out with one plate that I drew on it with crayon dage, which is a water base, like you would use in watercolor.
Right.
And it's a crayon.
Right.
So what I did is I drew the image on it, and then the other plate I put the color on. I rolled various amounts of colors and different colors. And I was thinking about summer and the warmth of the sun and the green in the grass and all of that. And this one is titled Friends.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
So this seems like a very challenging type of art form. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges?
Okay, one of the most difficult thing is working large.
Right.
Working large is a whole set of problems in itself, because you print with, like when you're printing, you're printing with wet paper. You have to dampen the paper and soften it so that the ink can be pushed into it. And that paper wants to
Be
to
very
bend,
floppy,
and it's
yes,
really
I can
sloppy. And to get it laid out right can be difficult, as well as etching large plates is very, very difficult, unless you have the really expensive tanks and things like that.
So the smaller ones, and they all do this, where it indents into the paper. So that's, you dampen the paper so that it also will hold the indent. You can feel the texture of it.
Yeah, well, the blankets on the press literally push the paper down and stretch it around the plate.
Oh.
And that's why you end up with the edges,
indents.
the edges you can feel.
Well, thank you so much for being on Talk Art. This was very informative and educational. I learned a lot from you this evening, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you.